it was a phenomenal weekend for rugby, and there was a lot of other smaller games that are pretty interesting too. And that's what's going to translate us into the World Rugby ranking updates here. Now, guys, obviously, as you know, we do the top 30 here, not the top 100. No, we don't do the top 110 here, because a lot of the time, outside the top 30, it's actually probably, I would say, outside the top 40. No, maybe top 50, you don't usually see those teams play. Like, they're technically a team, but you don't actually see them play. So that's why, if you're wondering why we only do the top 30, it's because, one, I don't want to read through the top 110 every single week, and two, there's a reason why they're outside that area, because they don't usually play a great deal. That's why American Samoa are last, because I truly don't believe that they probably would be last. I think they would be beating a lot of these teams above them. But like I said, they do not play. But let's go through the World Rugby rankings here. So in the top 30, we start off here with the Germans. Yes, they're in 30. Did they play actually over the weekend? No, I think they played this weekend.
Indeed. They lost up against Poland 21 points to 16.
Oh, there you go. They did play this weekend. I probably should have been listening to you when you said the results just then. But obviously, there's so many results, I couldn't really remember. But Poland, they actually jump above them because of that. So Germany didn't drop down, but Poland will go above them into 29th. They were 32nd, Poland. So that means that a team just dropped out, and that was Switzerland. Switzerland is not in the top 30 no more. They have gone down to 33. Going down to 28. Like I said, guys, there's a lot of change in these World Rugby rankings. Number 28, down. Brazil, they go from 27 to 28. And in at number 27 is Belgium. 28 to 27, they go up the one spot. Chile, they go from 26 to, sorry, 20. It says 26 to 26. Oh, yeah, they didn't go up or down. That's why it says 26 to 26. Namibia, Netherlands in 25. Namibia in 24. Hong Kong, down they go, son. Down they go from 22 to 23. And the Canadians, they go from 23 to 22. Russia, they're stable, number 21. Spain in 20. The Portuguese, good performance against Japan. They don't move down. They don't move up. They stay right there at number 19. USA in 18. Uruguay, 17. Romania, good performance by them in 16. Tonga, 15. Italy, 14. 13 is Samoa. Georgia in 12. The Fijians in 11. That's going to be a really heavy debate about how their discipline is right now. Japan, number 10. Wales in 9. Lucky Wales in 9, mind you, because like I said with that Fiji game, we're going to be speaking about the discipline, because otherwise I think Fiji could have won that game. Argentina in 8th. Scotland in 7th. 6 is France, and then we start to get through a couple of big-time changes, big boys. Put your seatbelt on and get ready for this one. Australia from 3rd to 5th. Ireland from 5th to 4th. England from 4th to 3rd. New Zealand, they drop big time. They're now 1.81 below South Africa, who've gone back up to number 1. So because of that big loss to the Irish, New Zealand have dropped pretty significantly there in their points. Obviously, they're still second, but they've dropped pretty considerably in the points. And South Africa, after their win, they have gone up to numero uno. So the biggest climbers this week, guys, and this is the one that I was mentioning on the world results that Hamish was going through. A couple of weeks ago, Lithuania, they were actually outside the top 60. This week, they were at 53 because they've had a couple of wins recently, and now they're into 43 because they did beat, I think it was, you said Switzerland? Mm-hmm. I think it was Switzerland. It was Switzerland. Lithuania beat them. Which put them into the 43rd ranking. Now, I don't believe Lithuania have a game this week. I'm just quickly checking here, but do keep in mind, keep an update on them because they have been making a bit of a rise on the rankings recently. Poland, they go from 32 into 29, so they are now featuring as a part of our podcast in the top 30. Zimbabwe, they're very close. They're from 34 to 32. South Africa, obviously, from 2 to 1, and England from 4 to 3. I was much more happier reading out the big jumpers from below there before. And then I got to South Africa. I was like, oh, South Africa from 2 to 1, England from 4 to 3. Biggest fallers, we got Switzerland outside of the podcast now. They went from 29 to 33. Australia from 3 to 5. New Zealand from 1 to 2. Hong Kong 22 to 23. And Brazil from 27 to 28. So they're on the edge there, mate. What are your thoughts about all the changes that I've just mentioned?
Well, there are a heap of them, that is for sure. But it's interesting because you did mention that Belgium have actually gone up one ranking, haven't they?
Yes. I think that the reason why they've gone up one ranking is because Switzerland, they were 27th and they lost to the 53rd ranked Lithuania. So that would obviously, even though a loss, that's a big time loss there for Switzerland. Switzerland, that's a big loss.
It was quite interesting because we did work out that it is 16 points as kind of that magic cutoff of whether or not you get yourself a little bit of an extra boost on those rankings. So even though they did lose by 24 points, it kind of just helps them out that Switzerland did get knocked out. Although you did say that Switzerland are now outside of the podcast, although we've probably mentioned them the most we ever have on this one so far. So I'm sure they'll still be in our hearts and in our minds for a little while longer, the Swiss. But at this stage, Australia, that last try from England actually was what made the difference between them staying in fourth. Or sorry, that was actually the difference between England going to third or staying in fourth and Ireland having the number 3 spot. So it was that close in terms of that final conversion from Marcus Smith that changed a few more rankings. But yeah, it's going to be exciting to see what happens this weekend with all of the big matches that we have got ourselves.
Yeah, so obviously England at 86.61, Ireland at 86.30, and Australia 85.09. So obviously, that took it. Well, that would have taken it to 50. 17 instead of 15. Yeah, okay, fair enough. I get you now because obviously 16 is that points margin. But like I feel like with this podcast that what interests me the most is actually because I know everyone knows about the top 12. Everyone knows about the top 11 in South Africa, New Zealand, England, Ireland, Australia, France, Scotland, Argentina, Wales, Japan, Fiji, and to an extent Georgia. You'd even throw in Italy there. Everyone knows about all these countries and how quality they are. I like to see the emergence of these smaller nations, and that's why, watching Switzerland around that area, that's why watching Poland rise into the top 30. That's why I talk about Lithuania, who are still at 43, and not a single person on the planet would know. A lot of people probably don't even know Lithuania is a country, let alone they've got rugby there. No offense to Lithuania, but obviously it's not really a country that most people would know about, which is awesome to see that they're rising so high in the rankings. At 43, that's high for them. They were like 20 or 25 rankings lesser a couple of weeks ago. And now they're pushing their way up to potentially top 30. Not sure when the next game is. I think that's just what excites me the most about this podcast is that we speak, obviously, stuff that most people don't also take into account. So that's very interesting. But, overall, man, I think South Africa going back to first, I still personally believe, and I would argue that New Zealand are number one right now in regards to my personal rankings. I think South Africa is still quite dodgy, a lot of aspects. But what would you say to that?
I mean, I would say straight away, South Africa, you're not dodgy.
Oh my God, don't take it literally. I'm not saying you're dodgy. I'm just saying in respect to their buddy. This is a rugby podcast here, Hamish. This isn't a buddy.
I know, but
anytime
podcast, we've had a clip when it comes to like South Africans, like every time you just get destroyed in the comments section, and you know this.
This is on your channel, though. This is on your channel. This isn't on anyone else's channel. This is on your channel with the South Africans. They can't accept any banter. I'm not even bantering. I'm just telling you a fact that I think they're really dodging a lot of aspects of their rugby right now. If you don't like it, South Africans, well, keep listening. But like, I don't really care. I like South Africa as a country. I do get a lot of shit talk though on my stream, specifically from South Africans. I don't get it from many other countries besides England, but England's to be expected. I don't understand why South Africans are so heavy-handed in regards to a small, miniature little comment. But anyway, can you please respond to the rugby question that I asked you before you try to throw me under the bus?
Yeah, no worries. But at this stage, it's interesting that South Africa and New Zealand have been able to leapfrog each other so much over the last couple of months, just due to the fact that, like we mentioned, it's those rankings of whoever you're playing can really help you out. Like if South Africa get out of this match up against England with a massive win, or even just a win at that, they will have about 3 points clear of anyone else, perhaps. Definitely if the All Blacks do struggle up against France.
But that's what happened. That was what we were looking at before. Before South Africa played Australia, that was what South Africa were on. They were about a 3 or 4 point gap. I think they were 94 points and New Zealand were on 90. So I guess the world order is kind of going back to what it was before the two crazy Australia-South Africa results.
So it's going to be interesting to see, because I mean, it's that whole side of it as well. When you look through the results that we have, or the fixtures that we have got next week, England, South Africa, France versus New Zealand, Wales versus Australia. I think that one, Wales versus Australia, is the one that Australia definitely want to be able to get themselves a win, because they did drop 2 this week, and they certainly would probably drop another 1 or 2 if Wales were able to get the win, similar to what was going to happen with Fiji, how it would have been 9th to 11th. But
it would depend on France beating New Zealand, which I'm struggling to see now because, because of what we saw. We'll wait for the tips. But we did, I remember what we said at the beginning of this tour. We both said, if New Zealand go through this undefeated until France, that France, we both hit France. But we did say if they slip up, New Zealand will be absolutely. And also, France haven't been playing exactly unbelievable recently. Just want to throw that out there. They get 15 points to Georgia. Georgia's
a good side, though. Georgia, I know you don't rate them too much.
It's not that I don't rate them, but I also am very well aware of them. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm very well aware of Georgia. I think they play Fiji this week, don't they?
They have got the Fijians, but there is a reason that a lot of those sides in the top 14, etc., do choose Georgian forwards for their sides.
Absolutely.
There is
I agree
a
with
little bit of that power, a lot of that power, I should say. And I think Fiji, their discipline is going to be important, definitely, like you mentioned a little bit earlier on.
Oh, don't you worry. I've got an opinion on Fiji's discipline that will be coming up very, very soon. But I agree with Georgia. It comes down to the forwards. They've got, for me, not great backs. And their country will never be known for great backs. You look at every country and you've got a certain factor that you look at. Australia, it usually is a bit of a mix, but in the same sense, it's usually some pretty good movement in the back line. New Zealand is usually a pretty good mix. Well, let's go back down to the lower area because, look, when you look at Tonga, it's always the forwards. When you look at Samoa, it's always the forwards. When you look at Fiji, it's always the backs. It's never the forwards, which is actually weird because you would expect that Fiji would have big bobbers, and they do, but usually you look at Fiji as that back line kind of team, and then you get to Georgia. Georgia is absolutely forwards. Oh, geez. There's nothing about the backs that interests me at all.
Really?
USA, you would expect would be backline. I would expect normally. Portugal, the same. Spain, I would expect to be more so forwards, and that's exactly what we saw against Fiji the other week. Russia, the same forwards. It just depends on kind of where you're at. You can kind of see. If you look at a team, you can kind of tell what kind of that country would be. But I think we've spoken about enough here about the World Rugby rankings because we've got a lot of podcasts to talk about today.